Hi everyone, I want to thank you for joining in on this presentation. We will be going over Dr. Rosenhan's theory and study of being sane in sane places. So this study, the reasoning behind it was he wanted to see, can we differentiate sane people from insane? Can we see a difference in them? And one important quote that I found in his article that I found really important, and it's more generally, there are a great deal of conflicting data on the reality, utility, and meaning of such terms as sanity, insanity, mental illness, and schizophrenia. We use these terms in our everyday vocabulary, and I think it's important to realize, do we really understand the meaning of it, and do we have an accurate meaning of it? And so with this study, Dr. Rosenhan, including himself, he had 8 pseudo patients, 3 women, 5 men, with all different professions, including in the psychology field. They went into various hospitals across the globe, East Coast, West Coast, poor hospitals, private hospitals, understaffed, fully staffed, and we get a journal finding of it. And so these pseudo patients, they went in there. They had an interview, and during that interview, they said that they had one symptom, which was they were hearing a voice in their head that was saying the words empty, hollow, and thud. And so, besides that alteration of that symptom, the only other ones was their profession as well as their name, but all their background was the same. And so they were admitted into the hospitals, and once they were admitted, they stayed there for about 19, on average about 19 days. Some were a minimum of 17 days, some as more as 50 days, but on average 19 days. But once they were admitted, they ceased all abnormal behavior. So the voices, they ceased those, and they acted as if they were back at home in their everyday life. So in this setting, the pseudo patients did interact with both patients and attendants. With the workers, the interaction was very brief. The workers only answered their questions, but not really conversated with them. With patients that they conversated, after a while, they did find it suspicious. And when the patients voiced their suspicions, no one really took notice of it or made it an important thing to look into. And so during these observations, our pseudo patients, they did write down what they were observing. And at first, they were being very secretive, but when they noticed that no one was questioning them or they weren't being noticed, they decided to make it public. Now, of course, nurses, they did notice. They just wrote it down in their everyday reports. And it's important to know that in their everyday reports, they noted that their behavior was sane. They acted relatively, quote unquote, normal. There were some times, of course, these pseudo patients, they'd never been in hospitals before, or psychiatric hospitals, and so there were nerves, and then there was some irritation. But some would say that that's understanding. The nurses in these hospitals, they reported it as part of their diagnosis. Once they were admitted, they were diagnosed with schizophrenia, and so that kind of behavior that was chalked up to their diagnosis. Okay, now during their time, they did see a depersonalization. They noticed that there was segregation among the employees and the patients. There were corridors for the employees to be at, and they found that 11% of it was outside of the corridor. So that 11% was mingling as well as towards. So you got to wonder how much of their actual time was spent interacting with the patients. And like I said before, the attendings, they only answered the questions that really conversated, only what was necessary of them. And we see this both at the bottom level as well as the higher level. And that's where we kind of get that hierarchical status, where because you see the top people not really interacting, then it trickles down all the way to nurses and regular attendants, that they're there at a bare minimum, what they have to. So we kind of see that trickle down from the top all the way to the bottom, how it becomes, how it really affects the patients. And so for the results after their study, we noticed that the pseudo patients, they were released with the label of schizophrenia and remission. And so because they were once admitted as a schizophrenia, they don't lose that label. And with that, Dr. Rosenhan also saw that there was a type 2 error, which was the doctors admitted sane people into the hospitals to make sure that they weren't insane. If there was a little thought of it, just because they thought it was better safe than sorry, and they'd rather have that than have insane people out in the real world harming themselves or others. And so after this study, we do see that no, there isn't a difference. We can't see a difference between the sane and insane people. And we also notice that if there's any irate behavior that is unknown, if we don't know the cause of the why of it, then that's when we start deeming it as crazy or insane. And in this video, I actually find it really important for me as a visual learner, after reading the article and looking at this video as a supplement. It really kind of brings the study in a full circle. You have the man himself, Dr. Rosenhan, speaking on the study and kind of seeing his perspective of it. And so I think that is a really good video to look into. For this video, I know I only have about 10 minutes on here, and so for this video, I think it dives into the experiment more, and it kind of gives more detail into it instead of an overview. And so I think that's a really good video to look at and kind of look at the details of it all. So after this study, of course, the study was done in 1973. So there have been further studies that have either replicated it or contradicted it. We have Dr. Murray Goddard, that he had stressors, life stressors in his life, that he, unfortunately, it was involuntarily he was admitted. And so during that time, he did observe, and he did see some similarities as well as contradictors to Dr. Rosenhan's study. For example, he did see that there was more interaction with his stay than the others. And in 2001, we have a Christopher Scribner. He replicated the study and found a major contradiction. The difference in his study was the patients that he had prior diagnosis of schizophrenia. But the findings were that it was actually hard to admit them, whether it's based on insurance or they didn't have enough symptoms to admit them. We see that that's a huge obstacle, which was very different from Dr. Rosenhan's study, where the patients, it was very easy. With one symptom, they were able to get admitted. And so we kind of see the difference between all three. Okay. So, for this study, I really think it's important. It was definitely a good study to go into. We see three major focuses. We look at the hospital settings. How are their interactions? How is there less segregation? Is there more? We kind of dive into the settings. We see how we can fix it or expand on it. And then also kind of the labeling and depersonalization. Are the patients, being treated as equals? Are they being treated as human beings? Or are they being labeled, and being dehumanized, essentially? And then also we get to kind of see how to help them. Do they need proper medication, or is it just we need to put them in a different setting, a different environment? Is it their disease, or is it the atmosphere that they're in? I think we can really help by that And that is it. Thank you guys for checking out this presentation, and I hope it was very helpful.